Hey everyone, this video is about the TI-81, Texas Instruments' first graphing calculator that came on the market in 1990. And the story of the 81 is fascinating, and it marked the start of Texas Instruments' dominance in the education market, especially in the US. Because in 1990, the 81 was by no means the first graphing calculator on the market. And if you watch my video on the Casio 7000G, you'll know that that pioneering device was first to market in this new category 5 years earlier in 1985. And as we'll see, it's clear that the 81's design was highly influenced by the 7000G. And HP also had released its 28C graphing calculator 3 years earlier in 1987, but that had not taken off in the education market, and maybe it was partly due to its use of RPN, but it was also considerably more expensive at $270. And the TI-81 was well targeted for that school market. It was relatively cheap at around $110. It was reliable and easy to use for both teachers and students. And as Texas Instruments became influential in bodies like the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, when in 1990 that body called for the standardization of use of graphing calculators in classrooms, TI was very well placed with its new 81 to be able to capitalize on this change in teaching philosophy. And soon Texas Instruments was also able to sign partnership deals with textbook publishers, as well as get their calculators approved for use in key exams. And physically, the boxy design language of the 81 was consistent with other TI calculators of the era, such as this BA2 Plus and this 30 SLR Plus. And all these calculators came with protective plastic covers. The keyboard on the 81 is divided into 4 zones. At the top, there's the graphing functions, there's the editing functions, a line of advanced functions, and then below the scientific calculator section. And a nice subtle design feature is that the enter key is slightly taller than the other keys on the keyboard. And the keyboard experience on the 81 is acceptable without being great. The keys have a soft, springy feel to them. And for the 81, TI used the Zilog Z80 processor, a ubiquitous microcontroller of the time. And the Z80 was software compatible with the Intel 8080 instruction set, but was cheaper than the 8086 or 8088 CPUs. And it's interesting that TI didn't use their own microcontrollers for the series. Another interesting design decision was around the use of AAA batteries, which were a lot more easily available at the time than coin cells. But this later hardware revision did employ a single coin cell battery as a battery backup to prevent memory from being lost when the main batteries died. This was considered a critical problem with earlier revisions. Another defining characteristic of the 81 was that it had no input or output ports. So the core experience of the TI-81 is based on TI's Equation Operating System, or EOS. And EOS allowed numbers and operations to be entered in a straightforward sequence using order of operations. And here is an area where TI clearly pays homage to earlier Casio devices. And EOS supported implicit multiplication. So, for example, I can type and math and trig functions were entered before the argument. So say sine 45. And powers are entered via the hat character. And the TI-81 also included a number of built-in functions that could be accessed via the math and other menus. So there's polar to rectangular conversions, cubes and cube roots. There's also hyperbolics and permutations and combinations. So for example, to find the number of combinations of 3 from 8, you'd enter 8 and then select combinations and then 3. And you can edit the last equation using the up arrow and also the insert and delete keys. And like earlier Casios, you can also chain calculations either via the answer key or you can just type a new operand. And you can store numbers into a single character variable via the store key. So if I wanted to store 50 into X, I can use the convenient X variable key without the need to use the alpha shift. And once that's defined, I can now use X in an equation. And the TI-80 supports a number of different modes accessible via the mode menu. So for example, we've got scientific, engineering, or standard number representation. There's floating display or fixed display where you can pick the number of decimal places. You can do trig operations with radians or degrees. You can have function based on y equals x graphs or parametric graphs. You can display connected or dot graphs. You can turn the grid on a graph on or off, and you can use rectangular or polar coordinates. And obviously a key feature of the 81 was graphing, and graphing functions were accessible via the keys on the top row of the calculator. So the y equals screen is where equations can be entered referencing x. So after those are entered, we can hit our graph key to see those displayed. And the zoom screen allows zooming in or out to particular parameters, and the range of those coordinates are displayed in the range screen. We can set those numbers directly. The trace screen allows the graph to be displayed with a trace cursor that can be used to scroll left and right along a particular line. And you can switch equations using up and down. And the 81 also has a statistics screen where you can enter data and draw charts and perform linear, exponential and power regressions. And the TI-81 supported a early version of TI Basic with simple if statements, labels and go-tos. This functionality was available by the program screen. So for example, here is a simple program to determine whether an integer n is prime. And it starts by prompting for an input n, and then uses a loop to iterate from I from 2 to n. And then for each I, if I divides n exactly, we know that n has a factor and cannot be prime. So the program sets p to 0. The loop continues by incrementing I and jumping back to the start of the loop. And lastly, it displays the prime flag. And so to run this program, we can exit out to the home screen and select the program from the program screen to run it. And so say if we enter 47, that's a prime. But let's say we enter 49, that's not prime. In terms of programming, the 81 was quite limited with its 2K of RAM, no way to import or export programs off of the calculator. Much later in 2009, a hack was found to allow the 81 to run assembly language programs, and I'll include the link in the description to the exploit. But due to the 81's lack of I/O, this was more of a novelty than a practicality, and I can't show this working on this device because it doesn't have the appropriate ROM version. And so in summary, the TI-81 was a very easy to use and practical calculator for school teachers and students. And partly due to Texas Instruments marketing and advocacy, the TI-80X family quickly became the de facto standard in classrooms in the US. And after the 81, Texas Instruments went in two directions with its graphing calculators. So TI's second graphing calculator was the TI-85 in 1992, and the 85 was significantly more powerful than the 81. It was designed as a calculator primarily for use in engineering and calculus courses. But TI also continued to refine the 81. The TI-82 was released in 1993 with a greatly expanded 28 kilobytes of RAM. And then in 1996 came the 83. They added more RAM and an I/O link port. And in 89, TI brought out the TI-89, a new calculator built on the Motorola 68K chip that supported CAS features, and I have a separate video about the 89 Titanium and Voyage 200 that were part of that series. And it's interesting to see how the design language of the TI-8X family evolved over the time. So with the TI-83, TI established a more rounded ergonomic look, but I'm pretty partial to the original design. So overall, with the 81, Texas Instruments did a great job establishing a practical device for schools. They took the basic graphing calculator experience pioneered by Casio and made a device that was tailor-made for the classroom. And for better or worse, Texas Instruments have been able to preserve their near monopoly in secondary school market, certainly in the US since then, with devices like the 84 Plus series still based on the Z80 and EOS. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it useful. And if you did, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to get notified of new videos. So see you next time.